I didn't plan it, but life doesn't give you a heads up when your world is about to shatter. It was a normal Tuesday, the kind where you don't expect anything extraordinary to happen. I was sitting in my small, cluttered office in the heart of Manhattan, staring at my laptop screen, coding the latest feature for a new mobile app. I worked long hours to many hours, really, but I was just doing what needed to be done. My name is Tyler, and I'm a 28-year-old software developer at a tech startup. I'd been with my girlfriend, Emily, for almost 3 years now, and we'd been living together in a small apartment on the Upper West Side. The days blurred together, filled with long coding sessions, deadlines, and of course, the quiet hum of the city outside. Emily and I met in a bar one evening after a long week of work. I still remember it clearly. She had this infectious energy about her, wearing a leather jacket and flashing a smile that could melt even the hardest of hearts. We had an instant connection, chatting about everything from our favorite music to obscure films we'd both seen. I was captivated, and I thought I was lucky to have met someone like her. At the time, things were great. We had this easy chemistry, spontaneous dates, and late-night talks about life and the future. I didn't think much of her late nights out with friends or the occasional study session at the library, but I chalked it up to her being a psychology major. Emily had this vision of her future, a career as a therapist, a graduate degree, a fulfilling life, and I supported that dream. But dreams can be a dangerous thing when they start falling apart. It started with small things, her phone face down, an occasional late-night study session that seemed to stretch longer than expected. Then there were the subtle hints, like how she would get defensive if I asked about her day, or how she started talking about work constantly, especially a guy named James from her psychology group. I didn't think much of it at first, but the more she mentioned him, the more I started feeling like I was on the outside looking in. I'm not stupid. I knew what was happening. I could feel the distance between us growing, but I never expected to find out like this. Last week, I had a rare afternoon off. My boss had canceled a meeting with a client at the last minute, and I decided to surprise Emily. I'd grab her favorite coffee, take us to a little cafe we used to frequent, and see if we could salvage what was left of us. I didn't text her. I wanted it to be a surprise. I pulled up to the apartment, a sense of anticipation filling my chest. But as soon as I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The apartment was silent. I expected Emily to be home. She always was around this time, but all I heard was the sound of muffled voices from the bedroom. I froze in place, a sinking feeling creeping up on me. I walked closer to the bedroom door, my heart pounding in my ears, and that's when I heard it. "He still thinks I'm at the library." Emily's voice drifted through the crack in the door. I stopped. My hands went cold, the coffee I was holding forgotten. "He has no idea I'm with you?" It's actually kind of sad. It took a moment for me to process what I'd just heard. My mind scrambled, trying to make sense of it. I couldn't breathe. It was James. She was talking about James. A sick feeling churned in my stomach. I was standing there, listening to her laugh, to the casual way she spoke about me, about how easily I'd been manipulated. "Yeah, we can meet again tomorrow," she continued, her voice full of that fake sweetness. "He's working late, so I'll just tell him I've got a late study session or something." My heart felt like it had stopped beating. I wanted to open the door and confront her. I wanted to scream, but the part of me that still cared for her, that still wanted to believe in her, held me back. I didn't know what to do, but in that moment, something shifted. I wasn't going to be the angry, hurt guy she expected me to be. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I turned around and walked out. I didn't go back to the office that day. Instead, I drove around for hours, not really sure where I was going, not really caring. I couldn't stop hearing her voice in my head, the way she spoke about me like I was nothing more than a fool. The way she laughed with James, like it was some joke. My stomach twisted with anger, but it wasn't just anger anymore. It was something colder, a sense of betrayal so deep it felt like a permanent mark had been burned into my chest. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel, whether to be devastated or simply numb. I ended up in a quiet parking lot by the river, parked with my hands gripping the steering wheel, the only sound the hum of my car's engine. The world outside seemed to be moving in slow motion, but in my head, everything was sharp, every detail clear. I could still hear the sound of her voice, her sweet, fake tone as she talked about her secret life with James. But I couldn't confront her, not yet, not the way she expected. I called my best friend Marcus. He was the kind of guy who always had an opinion, even when you didn't ask for one. But today, I needed someone to talk to. Ty, what happened, man? He asked, his voice thick with concern. You alright? Yeah, I'm fine, I lied, trying to sound casual. I need a place to crash tonight. I could hear him pause on the other end, sensing something wasn't right. Sure, man, come over when you can. But what's going on? Talk to me. I told him everything, the sudden realization, the conversation I overheard. I even told him about James, the guy from Emily's life I had never seen as a threat. Man, Marcus said after a long pause, this is the kind of thing that changes everything. But listen, you don't have to handle this the way she expects. You don't need to give her the satisfaction of seeing you fall apart. His words hit me harder than I expected. The idea of leaving without a scene, of vanishing in silence, felt like something I could control, something she couldn't twist or manipulate. I've got a plan, I said, my voice steady now. I'm not going to let her make a fool of me. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at Marcus's place, sitting on his couch for hours, going over the details, thinking about how I wanted this to end. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind clear. Emily would expect me to react, probably to storm into the apartment, shout, throw a scene. That's what she was waiting for. But that wasn't what she was going to get. I started with the basics, securing my finances. I opened a new bank account at a different branch, moved every single penny into it. I knew Emily had access to our joint account, and I wasn't going to give her a chance to pull any last-minute stunts. I wasn't about to let her drain everything I had worked for while she pretended she had no idea what she was doing. After that, I contacted the building manager. I wasn't just going to leave my apartment and let her have everything. I needed out of the lease, and I needed it fast. Is there any way you can help me out with an early termination? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Family emergency. I'm really in a tight spot. The manager was surprisingly understanding. He agreed to break the lease with a penalty, but at least I wasn't tied down to that apartment anymore. Emily would be the one left with the rent, left to explain to her new lover how she'd put herself in this position. With the apartment and finances secured, I took a breath and made my next move. The next day, I was back at the apartment. I knew Emily wouldn't be home for a while. She'd texted me earlier, saying something about a study group. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Instead, I walked through the door with a calmness I hadn't felt in weeks. I wasn't mad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I moved quickly through the apartment, gathering the few things I needed: clothes, important documents, and my laptop. Everything else, I left behind. I wasn't going to fight for a place in her life anymore. I was done. When I finished packing, I went to the kitchen. I wrote a note on the back of a receipt I found lying around. I heard your conversation with James. We're done. Don't contact me again. I left the note on the counter, along with the apartment key. Then, I walked out. I stayed at Marcus's place for the next couple of days, not answering Emily's calls, not responding to any of her frantic messages. She'd tried to call me several times, left me multiple voicemails, but I didn't listen. I couldn't. I wasn't going to give her the chance to manipulate me anymore. But eventually, she showed up at Marcus's apartment. It was the morning of the third day. Marcus was in the kitchen, making breakfast when I heard a knock at the door. I froze. My heart pounded. Tyler, Emily's voice came through the door, fragile and desperate. Please, just let me in. We need to talk. We need to fix this. I could hear the tears in her voice, but I wasn't moved. I'd been hearing that voice for years, but this time, it wasn't enough. Marcus peeked through the peephole and raised an eyebrow. It's her, isn't it? I didn't respond. Emily knocked again, more insistently this time. Tyler, please. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to understand. I was confused. I was lonely. I made a mistake. Please just talk to me. I stood in the middle of the living room, feeling something inside me shift. I had been hurt. I had been betrayed. But I didn't owe her anything. Not anymore. I walked over to the door and unlocked it. When I opened it, Emily stood there, looking nothing like the confident woman I'd once known. Her hair was tangled, her makeup smeared, and she wore that same defeated look I had grown so used to seeing over the past few months. She looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. Tyler, please. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, calm and detached. It was almost surreal. This was the woman I had loved, the one who had once promised me a future together. And now, here she was, begging me to forgive her. But it wasn't about forgiveness anymore. I stepped aside and let her in, then calmly closed the door behind her. She was pacing, twisting her hands in that nervous way she did when she was scared. "You don't have to say anything, Tyler," she whispered, almost pleading. "I know I messed up, but please, please, just give me a chance. I can fix this." The silence in the apartment felt suffocating. Emily had stopped pacing, but the weight of her words still hung in the air. Every time she glanced at me, it was like she was measuring how much of me was still left, how much of me she could pull back in. I was determined to remain composed, but inside, I was wrestling with something I hadn't expected. Doubt. I hadn't expected it to be this hard. I had been so certain, so ready to move on. But as I stood there, watching her, the woman I once loved, I felt the pull of old emotions. The part of me that wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay if she just tried harder, was still there. But that wasn't who I was anymore. I couldn't let myself fall back into the same trap. "Tyler," she said, her voice trembling now, "please, just tell me what I can do. I'll do anything." I leaned against the door, arms crossed, trying to keep my cool. She had said the words so many times before. "I'll do anything." It was always the same, always empty. "You don't understand, do you?" I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "I'm done being manipulated, Emily. I don't care about the excuses. I don't care about the tears. You made your choice." She stepped toward me, her hand outstretched, but I took a step back, putting space between us. "Please, Tyler. We've been through so much together. You can't just throw that all away," she pleaded, her eyes wide with desperation. I could see it in her face how much she wanted to make me believe her. She wasn't crying anymore, just looking at me like I was the last lifeline in a storm she'd created. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "We've been through a lot, but what we had is gone. You're not the person I thought you were, and I'm not the person I was when I met you." The truth hit her like a slap. Her face contorted with confusion and frustration, but more than that there was fear. Fear that she had lost control over me, that I was slipping away, and nothing she could say or do would bring me back. She took a deep breath, as if trying to summon her last ounce of strength. "So, what now? Are you just going to leave me out here with nothing?" For a moment, I didn't answer. I just stared at her. I could almost see her calculating her next move, trying to figure out how to turn things around. "You've already left me with nothing, Emily," I finally said. "I'm not leaving you, you're leaving me." Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw something real in her eyes. Anger, disappointment, but not the kind that made her regret what she'd done. No, this was the kind of anger that came when someone realized they had lost their grip on you. I could feel it in the air, thick and heavy between us. I didn't know how long we stood there in that tense silence. It felt like hours, but in reality, it was only a few minutes. Eventually, Emily spoke again, her voice low. "You're really just going to walk away from all of this? You're just going to act like nothing happened?" I didn't respond at first. Then I looked her straight in the eye. "You already made that decision, Emily. Don't try to make it seem like I'm the one running from this." She let out a bitter laugh, almost like she was trying to convince herself it wasn't happening. "So this is how it ends? You're just walking away with no second chances?" "Second chances are for people who deserve them," I said, my voice cold now. "You don't." She stepped back, as if my words physically pushed her away. "You'll regret this, Tyler. You'll see. You won't be able to live with yourself." "I already have to live with the choice you made," I said, the weight of the truth sinking in. "I'm not the one who's going to regret this. You are." The next few days were a blur. I didn't hear from Emily again, not directly, but I felt her presence in the back of my mind constantly. She was relentless. She had to be. After everything, I knew she would try to find a way to regain control, and I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I spent the next day at the office, trying to bury myself in work. I didn't want to think about what was happening outside of the office walls. The last thing I wanted was to be consumed by this emotional roller coaster, by everything she had put me through. But as the day went on, the pressure in my chest began to build. I was fine. I was moving on, but the quiet, nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't go away. She was still out there, and she was still trying to figure out how to fix things. I didn't know if I was ready for that. By the time I left the office, it was already dark, and I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. But it wasn't the same as before. I wasn't afraid of what she might say or do anymore. I wasn't afraid of losing her. I had already lost her. When I got home, I sat in my apartment, staring at the empty space. For the first time in weeks, it was quiet. I could feel the calm settling in. But as I sat there, I realized something. This wasn't just about Emily. This was about me. About how I had let myself be controlled for so long. How I had given away my peace to someone who didn't deserve it. It wasn't just her betrayal that had hurt me, it was how much I had ignored my own worth. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was free. A few days later, I ran into Emily again. I had just stepped into a coffee shop when I saw her sitting by the window, her face hidden behind a newspaper, but I knew it was her. At first, I thought about turning around. I thought about walking away, continuing to leave her behind. But something in me, something that had changed, made me stop. I walked over to her table and stood there. She looked up, her eyes wide in surprise. For a moment, she didn't speak. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She stared at me for a long time, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. Instead, she gave a small, bitter laugh. "You really are done, aren't you?" I didn't answer. I just nodded. "Yeah," she said, looking down at her hands. "I guess I am too." I stayed there for a moment, then turned and walked away, ending with a question to the audience. I felt like I had finally taken control of my life, like I had broken free from something that had been holding me hostage for far too long. But still, the question lingers in my mind. Is it possible to truly forgive someone who's hurt you? Or do we just move on, pretending we're better for it? What do you think? Would you ever give someone who betrayed you a second chance? Or is letting them go the only real option for healing? I hadn't expected it to happen this way. After seeing Emily in the coffee shop, there was a part of me that thought maybe things could be different. Maybe we could have a real conversation and find some way to close the chapter without all the bitterness, without the anger. But the truth was, every time I saw her, it felt like she was still trying to manipulate me, trying to pull me back into her web. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore. I didn't hear from her for a few days after that meeting, and I almost convinced myself that it was over. I had let her go. I had cut her out. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. But then came the message that I had been expecting. It was a late evening when I checked my phone and saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. I hesitated before answering, my thumb hovering over the screen. "Tyler." The voice on the other end was shaky, almost like she'd been crying. "I need to talk to you, please." I didn't want to pick up. I didn't want to hear her voice, hear her apologies, but a small part of me still felt the pull. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that deep-rooted part of me that was still struggling with the idea of completely closing the door. "What do you want, Emily?" I asked, my voice steady but guarded. "I've made a mistake," she said, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "I know I hurt you, and I can't take that back, but please, can we talk? I just need you to listen." I should have hung up. I should have ignored her, blocked her number, and erased her completely from my life. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself agreeing to meet her, just to hear what she had to say. I told myself it was for closure. It was for peace of mind. I wasn't ready to give up on myself, but maybe I could get the answers I needed to fully move on. I met her at a park downtown. She chose the spot, a quiet bench near the water, where the late afternoon sun painted the skyline in hues of orange and pink. Emily was sitting on the bench when I arrived, looking fragile, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her hair was messy, and her clothes were a little too casual, like she wasn't even trying to impress me anymore. She looked up as I approached, her eyes wide, desperate. "Tyler," she whispered. I didn't know where else to go. I can't fix what I've done, but I'm so sorry." I didn't respond immediately. I just stood there, trying to keep my emotions in check. The old me would have felt the urge to comfort her. But now I just wanted answers. I needed to know what had driven her to destroy everything between us. "Why, Emily?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "Why did you do it? Why him?" She looked down at her hands, fiddling with her fingers like she was trying to keep them from shaking. "I don't know," she said, her voice soft. I felt lost. I thought I needed someone else to fill the emptiness I've been feeling for months. And James made me feel wanted. He made me feel important. "I didn't think about what I was doing to you. I never thought you'd find out." Her words cut deeper than I expected. The way she spoke about it so casually, like it was nothing more than a mistake that could somehow be undone with a few words. "I don't know how to fix this, Tyler," she said, her eyes lifting to meet mine. "I don't know if I can, but I want to try. I want to prove to you that I can be the person you thought I was." I could see it in her eyes, the hope, the desperation, the same manipulation I had seen before. But now, I could see through it. Now I understood. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice growing cold. "You don't get to fix this. You don't get to undo the damage you've done. This isn't something you can just apologize for and expect everything to go back to normal." Her face fell, her eyes welling up with tears. "Please, Tyler, I need you. I don't know how to fix my life without you." It was in that moment that I realized something important. I wasn't here to save her. I wasn't here to give her another chance. I was here because I needed closure. I needed to be absolutely certain that I was making the right decision in cutting her out of my life. "I don't need you anymore, Emily," I said, my voice firm. "I've spent too long thinking I was the problem. But the truth is, I was always giving, and you were always taking. I gave you everything, and you took it all. But I'm done." Her face twisted, a mix of disbelief and anger crossing her features. "You're really going to walk away? After everything?" "Yes," I said, standing up and turning to leave. "I'm walking away. And for the first time, I feel like I'm doing the right thing." As I walked away, I felt something shift in me. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even pain. It was freedom. The weight of her betrayal was finally starting to lift off my shoulders. The next few weeks passed quietly. I stayed focused on work and spent time with Marcus, who was more than happy to offer his support, even if it was in the form of sarcastic comments and bad jokes. I started to rebuild the small parts of my life that Emily had torn down. I went to the gym regularly, made new plans for my future, and even began considering a move out of the city. Something bigger, something new. But then came the unexpected. One afternoon, as I was leaving work, I saw Emily walking down the street. She looked different, haggard, like she hadn't slept in days. She spotted me from a distance, and for a brief moment, I could see the same desperation in her eyes. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I didn't approach her. I didn't say anything. Instead, I turned and walked away without looking back. It's strange how silence can speak louder than words. It had been almost a month since I walked away from Emily, since I made that final decision to cut her out of my life completely. The days had passed slowly, but with each one, I felt like I was shedding a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. I was starting to feel like myself again, not the version of me that had spent years in her shadow, questioning my worth, trying to fix a relationship that had been broken long before I realized it. No, this was a new me, a version of me that didn't need her validation, her manipulation, or her lies. I had the freedom I never thought I would have. I spent my evenings with Marcus, catching up over drinks, talking about work, discussing future plans. We talked about everything except Emily, which was exactly how I wanted it. She was still trying to reach me through texts and missed calls, but I never answered. I didn't need her to come back into my life. I didn't want to hear her apologies, her excuses. The world outside felt brighter somehow. I could breathe again. But even with all this newfound clarity, the quiet was broken. One morning, unexpectedly, I was sitting in my office, getting ready to dive into a new project, when I saw a familiar face walk through the door. It was Jenna, the receptionist, holding an envelope in her hand. She looked nervous, like she was about to deliver bad news. "Tyler," she called softly, her voice hesitant. I glanced up. "What's up?" She handed me the envelope, her eyes glancing around the office before she spoke in a low tone. "It's for you. It's from Emily. She left it on your desk." I didn't take the envelope right away. My mind flashed to the last time I saw her, her pleading eyes, her broken voice. I had made it clear that we were done. But the envelope sat there, mocking me, asking me to confront the past one more time. I knew I could ignore it. I knew I could throw it away and never think about it again. But for some reason, I opened it. Inside, there was a handwritten letter, Emily's familiar script. My heart clenched as I read the first few words. "Tyler, I don't know where to begin. I know I've hurt you. I know I've made terrible mistakes. But I need you to understand something. I never meant to hurt you. I was just lost, and I was trying to find my way out. James was a mistake. I was stupid, and I'm so sorry for everything I did to you." I read the letter quickly, my hands shaking as I continued down the page. There was more. but it didn't matter. The apology was hollow. It wasn't the first time she had said something like this. She had done this before, used her tears, her guilt, to pull me back in. But now, it didn't work. I felt nothing. I stood up and walked to the shredder, putting the letter inside. As the paper was torn apart, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. It was finally over. The next few weeks passed without incident. My life continued to move forward. I buried myself in work, focusing on new projects, new goals, and a future that didn't involve Emily. But despite my resolution, I couldn't ignore the undercurrent of change around me. I felt it in the way people at work treated me differently. I was suddenly more confident, more engaged. I had taken control of my life, and it was obvious. Even my colleagues, who had always seen me as the quiet, hardworking guy, now seemed to look at me with a kind of respect I hadn't earned before. Then, one afternoon, just as I was wrapping up a meeting, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't open it. I had blocked everyone from Emily's side of the world, her friends, her family, even her coworkers. But for some reason, I opened it. It was a short text. Tyler, we need to talk, please. I made a huge mistake, and I need you to know the truth. I'm not who you think I am. I've changed. Please, let me explain. It was from James. My stomach dropped. The last thing I wanted to do was get involved with Emily or her mess again. But something in me stirred. Was this the final part of the story? The last twist before I could truly close the door? I thought about ignoring it. I thought about deleting the message and moving on, the way I had been doing. But I couldn't help myself. I replied, "What do you want?" His reply came almost immediately. "I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you. I just need to explain. Please, meet me at the park by the lake." I didn't know why I agreed to meet him. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I wanted to hear his side, even if I already knew it wasn't going to change anything. But I agreed. I showed up at the park a few hours later. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the grass. I spotted James almost immediately sitting on one of the benches, his hands resting in his lap, his posture stiff, like he was waiting for me to hit him. When he saw me, he stood up, his face filled with guilt and apprehension. "Tyler," he began, his voice shaky. "I know this is the last thing you want to hear from me, but I owe you the truth." I raised my hand, stopping him before he could continue. "Save it. I don't care what you have to say. This isn't about you anymore." He seemed to shrink at my words, his face flushing with embarrassment. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I just wanted to say, I didn't realize how much I was hurting you until it was too late. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this." For a moment, I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something. He wasn't the problem. Emily was. She was the one who had lied to both of us, manipulated both of us. James had been a pawn in her game. But that didn't matter anymore. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need to hear him beg. I had made my peace with everything, and I wasn't going to let Emily's mess drag me back into it. I turned away from James, walking toward the parking lot without saying another word. I didn't look back, not once. As I walked away from the park, leaving James behind, something inside me felt lighter. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for months, the weight of betrayal, confusion, and heartbreak began to lift. It wasn't just that I was done with Emily. It wasn't just that I was done with her lies. It was that I was finally, truly, done with the person I had become because of her. I had allowed myself to be so deeply entangled in her manipulations, her games, that I forgot who I was. But walking away from James and from everything that came with Emily felt like I had shed an old skin, like I had broken free from a trap I hadn't even realized I was in. I didn't want to see James again. I didn't want to see Emily. The only thing I wanted now was peace. I spent the next few weeks focusing entirely on myself. I started taking long walks around the city after work, exploring new places I'd never bothered to visit when I was always wrapped up in her. I joined a rock climbing gym, something I'd always wanted to do but never made the time for. I met new people, laughed without guilt, and began to rebuild the parts of me that had been buried under the weight of someone else's mistakes. And slowly, the man I once was began to resurface, the man who was confident, independent, and capable of standing on his own 2 feet. I didn't need anyone to complete me anymore. I didn't need validation from a relationship that was never meant to last. One evening, after a particularly grueling work week, I received a call from Marcus. "Hey man, you busy?" he asked. I laughed. rubbing my eyes. Honestly, I'm wiped. But you know what? I think I'll head out for a bit. What's up? We're meeting a few people at that bar downtown, he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. You should come. Get out of your head for a bit. You've been cooped up long enough. It had been a while since I'd gone out with him, and as much as I loved the solitude, I couldn't deny that a night out sounded good. I needed it. I agreed, and within the hour, I was dressed and headed to the bar, letting go of the stresses that had been building up. When I arrived, the bar was buzzing with laughter and conversation. The crowd was light, but the atmosphere was warm, casual, like a place where old friends could reconnect. Marcus waved me over, and we sat with a group of people I hadn't met before. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Emily. I wasn't thinking about the past or what had been. I was just here, present, engaged, and it felt damn good. The night went by quickly, filled with light conversation, a few drinks, and even some silly bets on who could name the most 90 seconds rock bands. I didn't care about the outcome. I was laughing. I was enjoying myself without the burden of someone else's baggage weighing me down. Around midnight, as I was getting ready to leave, I spotted someone at the far end of the bar. At first, I wasn't sure why they looked familiar, but then it hit me. It was Julia, the designer from work. She had been one of the few people who made me laugh during some of my toughest moments at the office. We'd always had an easy camaraderie, but nothing more than that until now. Tyler, she called over, her voice cutting through the noise. Hey you, I didn't know you were a bar goer. What's up? I smiled, feeling that familiar ease. I guess I am now. You don't mind me crashing the party, do you? She laughed. Not at all. You're just in time for another round. Join us. I walked over to her, and as I sat down, it felt like everything I'd been through, everything I'd fought to escape had been leading me to this very moment. There was no weight on my shoulders. There was no part of me that felt held back or unfinished. Just two people, enjoying a good night. No expectations, no baggage, just the present. As the night wore on, Julia and I talked more, laughed even more, and eventually traded numbers. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. It was simple. And in that simplicity, I realized something crucial. I didn't need to rush into another relationship, but it felt good to know that I was ready for something real, something authentic, when the time came. The next morning, I woke up to a quiet apartment. For the first time in a long time, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. I felt at peace. The past few months had been difficult, but they had also been some of the most transformative of my life. I had faced betrayal. I had confronted my fears, and I had learned how to live for myself. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. I didn't need to be anyone's second choice. I was learning to choose myself, and that was all that mattered. As I looked out the window at the brightening sky, I smiled. There was no regret, no longing for a past that had long since faded away. I was moving forward, and it felt good. I thought I had everything figured out when I was with Emily, but it took me losing myself to finally realize who I truly was and who I could become. Sometimes it's only through heartbreak that we find our way back to ourselves. So I ask you, how do you find the strength to let go of something or someone you thought you couldn't live without? And what's the hardest part of truly moving on?